Hello, everyone. I'm the storyteller, and I'm here to help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. Get comfortable and relax.
The Access Corps office building seemed huge as I walked up to it holding my resume folder. After 4 months without a job, I had almost no money left. My student loans kept piling up and my landlord was getting impatient. My interview last week went really well, better than I thought it would. When they called offering me a job that paid almost 20% more than my old one, I just took it. I fixed my tie, something I do when I'm nervous, just like my dad used to. The lobby looked modern with lots of glass and steel, and a security guard with big shoulders checked my ID without smiling. "Thomas Miller for Roger Allen," I said, trying to sound confident. He made a call, handed me a visitor badge, then pointed toward the elevators. 14th floor. The elevator doors slid open to a typical office gray carpet, white walls, and a maze of cubicles. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and lines around his eyes waited by the receptionist's desk. He didn't offer a handshake. "Thomas Miller, right on time." His voice was gruff but not unfriendly. "I'm Roger Allen, Data Operations Manager, your direct supervisor." "Thank you for the opportunity, sir. I'm excited to join the team." Roger looked at me with an expression I couldn't figure out, then nodded toward a hallway. "Let's get you settled." I'd expected the standard first-day HR orientation benefits enrollment team introductions. Instead, Roger took me straight to a small cubicle with a computer that looked newly set up. "HR sent up your paperwork. Fill it out by lunch." He placed a manila folder on the desk. "Your login credentials are inside. The system will prompt you to change your password on first login." "Don't I need to go through orientation first?" Roger's jaw tightened slightly. "Our HR department has a different approach. You'll complete online modules this week." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "What you do need right away are the departmental guidelines." I took the paper expecting a list of standard procedures, dress code, lunch hours, reporting structure. Instead, there were just 4 numbered items. 1. Never enter the building before 7 Hazra a.m. 2. Always leave the building by 8 Hazras p.m. 3. Do not talk to extra team members. 4. Do not eat food left alone in break room areas. I looked up, waiting for the explanation or the rest of the list. Roger looked at me with a serious face. "These aren't suggestions, Miller. They're rules, non-negotiable ones." His tone left no room for debate. "Follow them without exception, no matter what." "Extra team members?" I asked, genuinely confused. "If you see someone who doesn't belong, don't engage. Report it to security." He checked his watch. "Any other questions about the rules?" I had dozens, but something about how he acted made me stop myself from asking them. "No, sir." "Good. Sarah Thompson from the analytics team will show you the database structures after lunch. Focus on getting your paperwork done and setting up your workstation this morning." With that, he walked away, leaving me alone at my new desk with a strange list of rules and a feeling that Access Corp wasn't what I expected. I spent the morning filling out tax forms and benefit selections, sometimes looking at the rules Roger had given me. They seemed really specific, and how serious he was about them seemed weird. But my rent was due in a week, and my credit card was almost maxed out. Whatever odd things were happening at this company, the salary would fix my money problems. The office filled up slowly throughout the morning. People walked around looking busy, nodding at each other, but rarely stopping to talk. I noticed a big wall clock you could see from almost every desk, and more than once I saw people checking their watches against it. At 12:30, a woman with light brown hair and a ponytail stopped by my cubicle. She had dark circles under her hazel eyes that made her look really tired. "Thomas Miller, I'm Sarah Thompson." Her smile seemed practiced. "Ready for the database walkthrough?" "Absolutely," I said, standing up. "And please, call me Tom." She nodded, but didn't invite me to use her first name. "The conference room is this way." As we walked, I tried making small talk. How long have you been with Access Corp? He said. 3 years in June. Her reply was clipped, her eyes constantly moving, scanning our surroundings. And how do you like it? She paused before answering. It's stable, good benefits. Not exactly a ringing endorsement. When we got to the small conference room, she closed the door and started explaining the company's database setup. She definitely knew her stuff, walking me through the systems with clear explanations. About halfway through her presentation, I decided to ask a few questions. So Roger gave me the 4 rules this morning, I said casually. Sarah's fingers froze on the keyboard. For a second, her professional attitude cracked, showing a flash of what looked like fear. They're important, she said, her voice tight. Very important. The one about extra team members seems strange. What exactly? The rules are there for a reason. She cut me off, her eyes darting to the door. Following them is part of being successful here. Right, but let's get back to the data integration process, she said, abruptly changing the subject. Her shoulders remained tense for the rest of our meeting. After the database training, I returned to my cubicle to set up my work email. As I organized my desk, I started to notice things I'd missed earlier. Security cameras were all over the office, but they seemed pointed at employees rather than doors or expensive equipment. People kept checking the time, and by 7:15 p.m., almost everyone had left. At 7:30 p.m., I packed up my stuff. Only a few employees were still there, and they all looked ready to go. Walking to the elevator, I passed some senior employees talking quietly together. Marcus didn't listen, one of them said. Stayed late every night last week. And now he's gone, another replied. Cleaned out his desk yesterday. That's the 3rd one this quarter, a third voice added. They stopped talking when they noticed me offering tight smiles as I passed. In the elevator, I was with Roger. His tie was loosened and he looked tired. How was your first day? He asked, not looking at me. Informative, I replied. Everyone seems very punctual. He nodded slightly. Efficiency is valued here. I couldn't help overhearing something about someone named Marcus. Roger's posture stiffened. Office politics. Nothing for you to worry about. The elevator reached the lobby and he stepped out. 7:00 a.m. tomorrow, Miller. Not a minute earlier. I watched him walk away. His warning stuck with me. On the train ride home, I thought about what I'd noticed: the strange rules, the tense atmosphere, the cryptic comments about Marcus. It all pointed to something unusual about Access Corp. Under different circumstances, I might have considered looking elsewhere for employment, but when I checked my bank balance on my phone, reality hit hard. My account showed $127.43. Not enough for rent, not enough for the minimum payment on my student loans. The notification of an incoming direct deposit from Access Corp in 2 weeks would change that. Whatever oddities existed at my new workplace, they paid well. And right now, that was what mattered most. The rules seemed simple enough to follow, even if I didn't understand their purpose. I ignored my worries. Every workplace had its quirks, its politics, its unwritten rules. I'd learned to deal with them just as I'd gotten used to other corporate cultures before. What harm could come from following a few strange guidelines? Little did I know then that at Access Corp, following the rules wasn't just about workplace etiquette or company policy. It was about survival. Exactly 7 days after my first day at Access Corp, I pulled into the parking garage at 6:59 a.m. I sat in my car watching the dashboard clock until the display clicked over to 7:00 before stepping out. The concrete parking area was mostly empty, with only a dozen or so cars spread out in the early morning. I noticed something in the far corner. The security guard from my first day was walking around a dusty Toyota Corolla writing something on a clipboard. His face looked blank, like he'd perfected that expression over time. "Morning," I said as I walked past my messenger bag slung over my shoulder. He looked up, eyes quickly noticing my face and badge. "Mr. Miller, early bird today." "Okay, birthday." "Not too early," I answered, tapping my watch. 7 on the dot, Joseph nodded toward the Toyota. Know anything about Reynolds, about Brian Reynolds? The name wasn't familiar. No. Should I? New hire like you, data analyst on the West Wing. He ran a hand over his short cropped hair. This is his car. Been here since yesterday morning. I stopped walking. He didn't drive home last night. He came in at 6:45 yesterday. Security system logged his badge. Joseph's eyes met mine. Never logged out. I felt sick to my stomach. Maybe he got a ride with someone else. Maybe... Joseph didn't sound convinced. Building services wants to know if they should call it in as abandoned. I looked at the car again. A gym bag was in the back seat. A parking ticket from 2 days ago was stuck under the windshield wiper. Small details that suggested its owner hadn't planned on leaving it. I didn't meet him yet, I said. Still learning who everyone is. Joseph nodded, making another note on his clipboard. Well, if you hear anything, let security know. I continued to the elevator, the information about Brian Reynolds turning over in my mind. As the doors closed, I remembered rule number 1, never enter the building before 7 a.m. Brian had come in 15 minutes early. The workday started normally. I logged into my computer, checked my emails, and continued familiarizing myself with the database structure Sarah had shown me. Around 10 a.m., an email from Human Resources appeared in everyone's inbox. Please be advised that Brian Reynolds has resigned from his position effective immediately. His responsibilities will be redistributed among the team until a replacement is hired. We wish him well in his future endeavors. Standard corporate language for someone who had quit without notice. I closed the email and got back to work, but couldn't shake the image of Brian's abandoned car in the parking garage. At lunch, I headed to the break room, careful not to take any food left unattended on the tables. The room was half full, conversations dropping to murmurs when I walked in. I recognized a guy from orientation who sat at a desk near Brian's. Hey, I said, sitting down with my brought-from-home sandwich. You work near Brian Reynolds, right? He looked up from his phone, eyes darting around before answering. Yeah, what about him? Just curious about the sudden resignation. Seems abrupt. Happens? He shrugged, his body language closing off. People come and go. His car is still in the parking garage. The man stood up, lunch half eaten. Look, I've got a meeting. He walked out, leaving me alone at the table. Throughout the afternoon, I tried to learn more about Brian, but everyone responded similarly, short answers followed by quick exits. By the end of the day, I had learned only that Brian was young, ambitious, and had mentioned staying late to catch up on work. As I packed up to leave right at 7:30 p.m., I saw Roger standing near the elevators. His eyes followed me across the floor. Miller, he said as I approached. Settling in. Yes, sir, getting there. His eyes were tired, the lines around them deeper than I remembered from last week. Saw you looking at Reynolds' car this morning. I hadn't realized he'd been in the garage. The security guard mentioned he came in early yesterday. Roger's jaw tightened. First rule exists for a reason, Miller. Without waiting for my response, he walked away, going around a corner. The weekend gave me time to think. Brian Reynolds had broken rule number 1 and was gone. The company claimed he resigned, but his car remained abandoned. No one wanted to talk about him. I felt more and more worried about Axis Corp. I opened my laptop and began searching for information about the company. Their public website showed the typical corporate talk: innovation, excellence, client satisfaction. Nothing unusual. I dug deeper, looking through business news archives and employee review sites. The patterns started to show up. Axis Corp had unusually high turnover rates compared to industry standards. Former employees left vague reviews mentioning strange workplace culture and arbitrary rules. One comment caught my attention. Follow their rules exactly or you won't last long. A few news articles mentioned workplace incidents at Axis Corp, though details were limited. 3 years ago, a police investigation followed after an employee went missing, but it was closed without explanation. The building had changed ownership multiple times in its 20-year history, with Axis Corp occupying it for the last 8 years. Nothing I found explained the strict rules or the strange atmosphere, but everything pointed to something wrong at the company. Monday morning, I arrived at exactly 7:00 a.m. Brian's Toyota was still in the garage, but now had a notice taped to the windshield, warning it would be towed in 48 hours, if not claimed. When I reached the 14th floor, a cleaning crew was emptying Brian's desk. They worked quickly, putting personal items in a cardboard box while wiping down surfaces, a family photo, a small desk plant, a Northwestern University mug. By the time I turned on my computer, all signs of Brian Reynolds were gone from the office. Sarah walked past my cubicle around noon, her steps speeding up when she saw me looking. "Sarah," I called, keeping my voice casual. "Got a second?" She hesitated before approaching, fingers nervously adjusting her watch. "What do you need, Thomas? Just wondering about Brian Reynolds. Did you work with him at all?" Her face tightened. "Not directly. Seems weird that his car is still here if he resigned." Sarah glanced around, then leaned closer. "Look, it's better not to ask questions about people who leave." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just follow the rules. All of them. All the time." "No." She cut me off. "I don't. And if you want to last here, you won't either." She straightened up, resuming her professional demeanor. "Let me know if you need help with the quarterly report format." That evening, I stayed until 7:30, watching as the office emptied around me. The urgency with which people packed up and left by 7:45 was telling. No one wanted to risk breaking rule number 2. At home, I pulled out a small notebook and began documenting what I'd observed. I listed the 4 rules, then added notes about Brian Reynolds and his violation of Rule 1. I wrote down dates I'd gathered from news articles about past incidents at Axis Corp, trying to find patterns. Most employee departures followed unusual behavior, coming in too early, staying too late, or, as mentioned in one review, I'd found talking to the wrong people. The rules weren't arbitrary corporate policies. They were survival mechanisms. I closed the notebook and made a decision. Whatever was happening at Axis Corp, whatever had happened to Brian Reynolds, I needed to protect myself. The salary was worth staying. My bank account was already looking healthier after just one paycheck, but not at the risk of disappearing like Brian. From now on, I would follow every rule to the letter, no exceptions, no matter what. I set multiple alarms on my phone, one for 6:55 a.m. to make sure I never arrived early, and another for 7:15 p.m. to ensure I was never caught leaving after 8. The rules were clear. 1. Never enter the building before 7:00 a.m. 2. Always leave the building by 8:00 p.m. 3. Do not engage with extra team members. 4. Do not consume food left unattended in break room areas. Simple enough to follow, even if I didn't understand what they were protecting me from. Until I learned more about what was happening at Axis Corp, strict compliance was my best defense. 3 weeks into my new position at Axis Corp, I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen in growing frustration. The quarterly data migration report that Roger had assigned me that morning was proving more complex than anticipated. Each time I thought I'd completed a section, I discovered inconsistencies that required further investigation. I glanced at the wall clock, 7:15 p.m. The office had gotten quiet around me as my coworkers had left, everyone leaving faster as time went by. I was alone in my section now, the overhead lights buzzing softly in the silence. Since my discovery about Brian Reynolds, I'd been careful about following all 4 rules. I arrived at exactly 7:00 a.m. each morning, avoided any unattended food in the break room, and made sure to be heading to my car by 7:30 p.m. at the latest. I'd even started keeping my eyes down when walking through the building, afraid of seeing someone who might be an extra team member. But today's report couldn't wait. Roger had made that clear when he dropped it on my desk that morning. The executive team needs this for their 9 a.m. meeting tomorrow. He'd set his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. "Get it done, Miller." I checked my watch again and tried to focus. The database query I'd written pulled up another set of numbers that didn't match the previous quarter's figures. I'd need to dig deeper to find the source of the discrepancy. I felt torn between wanting to follow the rules and not wanting to mess up at my new job. Just another 15 minutes, I muttered to myself. I'll be cutting it close, but I can still make it out by 8. I dove back into the data, tracing the inconsistencies through multiple tables. The solution was harder to find than I'd expected, and I had to look up documentation and check historical reports. When I finally identified the issue, an improperly formatted date field causing transactions to be counted twice, I felt really good. It wasn't until I finished implementing the fix and ran the final validation that I checked the time again. The clock read 7:55 p.m. I sprang into action, immediately saving my work and shutting down my computer. I got nervous as I packed my messenger bag, stuffing papers inside without bothering to organize them. 5 minutes to get out of the building. I could make it if I hurried. The elevator seemed to take forever to arrive. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, checking my watch with increasing anxiety. 7:58 p.m., 7:59 p.m. The elevator doors finally slid open and I stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. The digital display above the doors showed 8:01 p.m. Just as I reached the 5th floor, the elevator jerked to a halt, the lights inside blinking before going dim. A moment later they came back on, but dimmer than before. The elevator remained motionless. I pressed the lobby button again. Nothing happened. I tried the door open button, then hit the emergency call button. No response. "Come on," I said, pressing buttons at random. Now, after what felt like minutes but was really just seconds, the elevator moved downward, then stopped at the 14th floor, the floor I just left. The doors opened with a soft chime that seemed weirdly normal. The office space was dark. The overhead lights that normally stayed on 24/7 were now less than half as bright as usual. The cubicles looked strange and unfamiliar in the dim light. I wasn't sure whether to stay in the elevator or try to find the stairs. The choice was made for me when the elevator doors closed again, but the car didn't move. The buttons didn't work. I pressed the door open button again, and the elevator opened back to the 14th floor. I didn't want to, but I stepped out. I noticed the cold right away. The office was always kept at a steady 72 degrees, but now the air felt way colder, maybe 50 degrees and damp, which made it feel even colder. I pulled my jacket tighter. Then I smelled it. A smell like rotten eggs filled the air, getting stronger every second. I covered my nose with my sleeve, trying not to throw up. I needed to find the stairwell. If I could get to the lobby, I could leave through the main doors. I started moving through the dark office, following the dim overhead lights. A sound made me stop. Heavy footsteps from the far corridor, the one that led to the executive offices. Slow, heavy steps that made the floor shake a little under my feet. Then came the laughter, a low, rough sound that didn't sound human. It reminded me of what a large dog might sound like if it could laugh, but weird with too many sounds at once. I didn't think. I just reacted. I ducked into the nearest cubicle, my own, and crawled under the desk, making myself as small as possible. I pulled my bag close and tried to breathe quietly, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing sounded in the quiet office. The footsteps got closer along with other sounds, furniture being moved, objects falling to the floor. Whatever was out there was searching the office, going from cubicle to cubicle. I tried to track where it was just by listening, too scared to look out from my hiding spot. The footsteps and noise moved in a pattern down one row of cubicles, then the next, getting closer to where I was hiding. I heard a loud crash just 2 cubicles away, like a computer monitor being knocked off a desk. The rotten egg smell got stronger, and with it came another smell, something rotting like bad meat. The thing entered the cubicle next to mine. I could hear it breathing now, raspy, wet breaths that sounded like lungs full of fluid. It would breathe, then make loud sniffing sounds like an animal tracking by smell. I pushed myself against the back of my hiding spot, trying to disappear into the cheap office furniture. The footsteps stopped just outside my cubicle. The sniffing got louder. Something moved into my workspace. From under the desk, I could only see part of the hallway and a strange shadow, making the dim light even darker. Whatever made that shadow was big, bigger than a person. It sniffed again, taking a long breath that ended with a rough sound of interest. It had smelled me. The shadow moved further into my cubicle. I heard scratching on top of my desk like claws or nails dragging across the surface. Papers fell to the floor. I was so scared I could barely breathe. The breathing came closer. The thing was bending down, about to look under the desk. I was so terrified that words came out of my mouth before I could stop them. "I'm not here," I whispered immediately, regretting making any sound at all. The entity froze. The breathing stopped. The air grew even colder, condensation forming on the metal parts of my chair. Long seconds passed in complete silence. Then, to my surprise, the shadow withdrew. The footsteps resumed, moving away from my cubicle, continuing down the row, but without the previous searching behavior. I remained perfectly still, afraid that any movement might draw its attention back to me. The footsteps and occasional sounds of disturbance grew more distant, eventually fading completely. Still, I didn't move. Only when the overhead lights blinked and returned to their normal brightness did I dare to check my watch. 8:30 p.m. I'd been hiding for nearly half an hour. The smell of sulfur had disappeared and the temperature was returning to normal. Cautiously, I crawled out from under my desk and stood up, my legs stiff from being stuck in one position. The office looked normal, except for the mess in several cubicles. Computer monitors lay smashed on the floor. Chairs were knocked over and papers were scattered everywhere. My own desk had papers thrown about, but nothing was broken. I didn't wait to look around more. I grabbed my bag and ran for the stairwell, taking the stairs 2 at a time down to the lobby. The night security guard looked up in surprise as I burst through the stairwell door, sweating and out of breath. "Everything okay, Mr. Miller?" he asked, reaching for his phone. "Fine." I managed not slowing down as I headed for the exit. "Working late? Good night." I didn't stop running until I reached my car in the parking garage. Once inside, I locked the doors and sat there, hands shaking too badly to put the key in the ignition right away. When I finally managed to start the car and pull out of the garage, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something following me. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every noise in my apartment building made me tense. I lay awake, replaying what had happened, trying to make sense of it. What was that thing? Why had it seemed to listen when I told it I wasn't there? What would have happened if it had found me? The next morning, I arrived at work at 7:00 a.m., exhausted, but determined to maintain my routine. When the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, I half expected to see the aftermath of destruction, but everything looked normal. The cubicles that had been searched were tidy, with computers intact and papers neatly stacked. I walked to my desk in a daze, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I sat down, I noticed that the papers on my desk were arranged differently than I'd left them, organized into neat piles rather than the chaotic mess I'd seen last night. Roger was waiting by my desk when I returned from getting coffee. His face was grim eyes, tracking my movements as I set down my mug. "You stayed late last night," he said, not a question. I nodded, unable to find words at first. "The quarterly migration report. I lost track of time. Until when?" I tried to leave at 8, but the elevator... I paused, wondering how much to say. The look in Roger's eyes decided me. Something was in the office last night after 8. It searched the place, knocking things over. It almost found me hiding under my desk. Roger's expression didn't change, but the color drained from his face. "You saw it?" "No, just its shadow. I heard it moving around, smelled it, the sulfur." "And how did you avoid it?" I hesitated, feeling foolish. I told it I wasn't there, just whispered it. And it listened. It left. Roger took a deep breath, tension visible in his shoulders. "Don't break Rule 2 again, Miller. You got lucky. Many haven't." "What was it?" I asked. Roger looked around the office, which was filling with arriving employees. "Not here." He lowered his voice. "Just follow the rules. All of them. No exceptions." He walked away without another word, leaving me with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The rules weren't just random company policies. They were protection against whatever was in the building after hours. That afternoon, I set up multiple alarms on my phone. 7:10 p.m., 7:20 p.m., and 7:30 p.m. each, with more urgent messages than the last. I programmed my computer to show a reminder at 7. I even set my watch to vibrate every 15 minutes after 7. From that day forward, I was never in the building past 7:30 p.m. Whatever report, project, or task wasn't finished would have to wait until morning. No deadline was worth facing that thing again. As I drove home that evening well before sunset, I couldn't stop thinking about those whispered words, "I'm not here," and why they had worked. It seemed impossible, yet somehow the thing had listened, had accepted my denial of my own existence. The rules protected us, but I was starting to think they were just a temporary fix against something that had claimed the building as its own. Something that only came out after hours, looking for people who stayed too late. The stack of papers on my desk had grown since my encounter with the entity after hours. I'd buried myself in work during my 4th week at Axis Corp, arriving exactly at 7:00 a.m. and leaving by 7:30 p.m. without fail. The strict schedule had become my way to navigate this increasingly strange workplace without attracting unwanted attention. I was reviewing last quarter's financial projections when I noticed someone moving near my cubicle. Michael Parker walked past, nodding a casual greeting before continuing to the break room. I returned to my spreadsheet, but something bothered me. Something about Michael seemed off. 5 minutes later, I looked up as Michael passed by, again this time heading toward his desk. I blinked, suddenly alert. Hadn't he just gone to the break room? I hadn't seen him return. I stood up and looked over my cubicle wall. Michael sat at his desk typing at his computer. His auburn hair and gap-toothed smile looked the same as always. When he glanced up and noticed me watching, he waved friendly as ever. I didn't wave back. Instead, I pulled up the company directory on my computer and found Michael's profile. The photo showed his distinctive features: the thick-framed glasses, the neatly trimmed beard, the gap between his front teeth. I looked back at the man sitting at Michael's desk. He looked almost the same, but now that I was paying attention, I noticed small differences. His beard was slightly fuller, the frames of his glasses thinner, and when he smiled at a passing coworker, I didn't see the gap in his teeth. I felt nervous as I remembered rule number 3, do not talk to extra team members. I'd assumed extra team members meant unauthorized visitors or temporary workers. Now, staring at this almost but not quite Michael, I wondered if it meant something far more sinister. Throughout the morning, I watched the fake Michael's movements while pretending to work. He did Michael's job like he knew it well, attending meetings, making phone calls, and chatting with colleagues. No one seemed to notice anything unusual about him. He'd smile at me whenever our eyes met accidentally, and each time I quickly looked away, remembering the rule. By lunchtime, my neck hurt from stress. I took my homemade lunch and headed to the break room, choosing a seat with my back to the wall so I could watch the door. The fake Michael entered a few minutes later, carrying a sandwich from the cafe across the street, the same lunch the real Michael often brought. Sarah Thompson sat down beside me, her own lunch neatly packed in glass containers. "You okay?" she asked, her voice low. "You've been acting weird all morning." "Fine," I replied, not looking at her. My eyes were fixed on the imposter, who was now chatting easily with 2 developers from the web team. "Is something wrong with Michael?" Sarah followed my gaze. I turned to her, keeping my voice quiet. "That's not Michael." Sarah looked confused. "What are you talking about? He's sitting right there." "Look closely," I urged. "His beard is different. The glasses are wrong. That's not the Michael from the team photo." Sarah stared at the man for several seconds, then turned back to me, looking worried. "Thomas? That's definitely Michael, same as always. Why are you being rude to him?" "He said he waved at you twice and you completely ignored him." I felt sick. The fake Michael had been talking about me with Sarah. "Trust me, something's not right." I kept my voice calm even though my mind was racing. That's not the real Michael Parker. Sarah's face changed from worry to nervousness. She packed up her lunch, though she'd barely touched it. "Maybe you're working too hard. Or not sleeping enough," She stood to leave, then paused. Remember what I told you about asking questions? Some things are better left alone. After she left, I avoided the break room for the rest of the day, eating what was left of my lunch at my desk. I kept my head down, focusing on my work while staying very aware of the fake Michael's movements around the office. Each time he walked past my cubicle, I could feel him watching me, though I never looked up to check. At 3:15 p.m., my desk phone rang. Roger's gruff voice came through the speaker. Conference room C. Now. I went to the conference room. Roger was already inside with the blinds drawn, looking serious. He motioned for me to sit without saying hello. You've noticed, he said once I'd closed the door. The fake Michael. I nodded. No one else sees it. Roger's expression didn't change, but something like approval showed in his eyes. Most don't. Not until it's too late. He turned a laptop on the conference table showing security video of the lobby. The timestamp read 7:00 a.m. that morning. The video showed Michael Parker entering the building, swiping his badge at the security desk. The guard nodded a greeting as Michael headed toward the elevators. Roger fast-forwarded 10 minutes. At 7:10 a.m., Michael Parker entered the building again, wearing the same clothes, swiping the same badge. Joseph nodded just as he had before, clearly not noticing that he'd already seen Michael that morning. 2 Michaels, I whispered. The second one is what we call an extra Roger, explained, closing the laptop. They appear periodically, perfect copies as far as most people can tell, but not to everyone. He looked at me with new interest. You saw the differences immediately. That's rare. What are they? My mouth felt dry. Roger leaned back in his chair. We don't know exactly. They mimic our employees, integrate themselves into the office. They're mostly harmless until someone engages directly with them. What happens then? The person who engages disappears. Roger's tone was matter-of-fact, sometimes within hours, sometimes days later. But they always disappear. The implications hit me. Brian Reynolds. Did he engage with an extra the day before he disappeared? Roger confirmed. Security footage showed him having a lengthy conversation with someone who looked exactly like me. I was in Chicago that day at a conference. I remembered Brian's abandoned car in the parking garage. And Marcus, same story, different extra. Roger rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking every one of his 50-plus years. That's why the rules exist, Miller. They're not corporate bullshit. They're survival mechanisms. We figured them out over years of incidents. Does HR know the executives? Some do. Some don't want to. He stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. The important thing is you noticed. Keep doing that, and remember Rule 3, no exceptions. And before opening the door, he added, and verify who exits the building with you. Always. The extras never leave through the main doors. They use other ways out. If you see someone heading to a service exit or stairwell at the end of the day, keep your distance. I returned to my desk in a daze, the reality of Axis Corp's supernatural problem becoming clearer but no less terrifying. The rules weren't just important, they were literally life-saving protocols developed through tragedy and loss. At 7:25 p.m., I packed up my things following my strict routine. The office had emptied considerably, with only a few people still finishing up work. As I waited for the elevator, I noticed the fake Michael walking toward the parking garage elevators several yards behind Alex Hayes. Alex had been friendly to me during my first few weeks. He often stopped by my cubicle to chat. He didn't like Roger's rules, frequently staying past 7:30 and sometimes taking food from the break room without checking who had left it. Now, the imposter was following him, keeping a casual distance that wouldn't seem suspicious to someone unaware of the danger. I pulled out my phone and texted Alex. The Michael. Behind you isn't real. Don't talk to him. Rule number 3. I watched Alex check his phone as he entered the elevator. He looked back at the fake Michael, then at me waiting by the main elevators. He rolled his eyes and typed a response. My phone buzzed with his reply. You're taking these rules too seriously, man. Loosen up. The elevator doors closed, taking Alex and the imposter out of sight. I just stood there not knowing what to do. Should I try to follow them? Call security? But what could I say that wouldn't sound insane to anyone who couldn't see the differences? But my own elevator arrived and I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I wondered if Alex would listen to my warning, or if his not caring about the rules would get him into trouble he couldn't imagine. I spent the weekend thinking about Alex. Every hour or so I checked my phone hoping to see a text or missed call that would tell me he was safe. Nothing came. By Sunday night, I'd convinced myself he might not show up for work on Monday. Maybe he'd vanished like Brian Reynolds, his car left in the parking garage with a tow notice taped to the windshield. But Monday morning, Alex walked past my cubicle at 9:15 carrying coffee, looking completely normal. He nodded at me with his usual easy smile, showing no signs of distress. I felt so relieved. He'd survived his encounter with the fake Michael. "Morning," I said, fighting my urge to ask what had happened with the imposter. "Hey." He didn't stop walking. Didn't mention my text warning. I wanted to pull him aside to make sure it was really him and not another copy, but the memory of Roger's warning kept me silent. Verify, but don't engage. Around 10:30, I went to the break room for coffee. The small room was empty, but something new sat on the center table, a chocolate cake in a clear plastic container. A yellow Post-it note stuck to the top read, "Help yourself," in looping handwriting. The cake looked perfect with smooth chocolate frosting and what looked like chocolate shavings decorating the top. The rich smell made my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten breakfast, and the aroma was hard to resist. I took another step toward the cake, then stopped. Rule number 4. Do not consume unattended food in break room areas. After my experience with the after-hours entity and learning about the extras, I wasn't taking any chances. I backed away from the cake and turned to the coffee machine, keeping my eyes on my mug as I filled it. The door opened behind me and Alex walked in. He spotted the cake immediately, his face lighting up. "Sweet." Someone brought cake. He headed straight for it. "I wouldn't," I said, keeping my voice casual. "You know the rules." Alex rolled his eyes as he lifted the plastic cover. "These rules are just Roger's power trip. Come on, it's just cake. Someone's birthday, probably. Still." I sat my coffee down. Rule 4 exists for a reason. Like Rule 3 about your imaginary fake Michael? Alex laughed, picking up a plastic knife that sat beside the cake. "I talked to Michael this morning. He said you've been acting weird around him for days." That wasn't... I stopped remembering Roger's explanation. Most people couldn't see the differences in the extras. Alex couldn't understand the danger he couldn't perceive. Alex cut a generous slice of cake, the knife sinking through the chocolate frosting with ease. "This looks amazing." He placed it on a paper plate and took a plastic fork from the drawer. I reached for my phone thinking I should call Roger, but the break room door opened again. Roger stood in the doorway, his face going from normal to worried as he saw Alex lifting a forkful of cake to his mouth. "Hayes." Roger started, but it was too late. Alex took a large bite, making an appreciative sound. "God, that's good," he said, taking another bite before Roger could finish speaking. "You guys are missing out." Roger looked at me and shook his head a little, warning me not to get involved. His face had gone pale. "Miller, I need to see you in my office," Roger said, his voice tight. "Hayes, enjoy your cake." Roger turned and walked out. I followed, looking back once at Alex, who gave me a thumbs up as he continued eating, completely unaware of Roger's reaction. In Roger's office, he closed the door and sat heavily in his chair. I tried to warn him, I said. Roger nodded, rubbing his forehead. "I know, some people can't be saved from themselves." He looked at me directly. "You did the right thing not eating it. What's going to happen to Alex?" Roger didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was flat. "Nothing good." "Should we call someone?" "Get him medical help. It won't help." Roger glanced at his computer screen, then back at me. "The damage is already done. Go back to work, Miller, and stay away from Hayes for the rest of the day. I wanted to ask more questions, but Roger had already turned to his keyboard, typing with short, sharp keystrokes that made it clear our conversation was over. Throughout the day, I watched Alex from a distance. For the first few hours, he seemed fine, working at his computer and attending a team meeting around noon. By mid-afternoon, though, I noticed him rubbing his stomach occasionally, his face looking sweaty even in the cool office. At 4:30, he left early, walking quickly toward the elevators with his messenger bag pressed against his side. I tried to catch his eye as he passed, but he looked straight ahead, his normally confident walk now hunched and tense. The next morning, I arrived at exactly 7 a.m. as usual. Joseph, the security guard, gave me a sad nod as I badged in, his face more serious than normal. "Everything okay?" I asked. Joseph glanced around, then leaned closer. "Police activity at Lincoln Park this morning. One of your colleagues, I heard." My stomach dropped. "Who don't know the name?" "Young guy. Lived in those new apartment buildings on Clark. Alex lived on Clark Street. I dropped him off once after we'd both stayed late finishing the Henderson project. When I got to the 14th floor, everyone seemed tense. Small groups of employees stood near the kitchen talking quietly. I saw Sarah by the window looking worried while checking her phone." "Sarah," I approached cautiously. "What happened?" She looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "Alex Hayes. He's dead." Even though Joseph's words had prepared me, hearing it confirmed hit me hard. "How?" "They found him in his bathroom this morning. His twomant called 911 when he wouldn't respond." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "The paramedics are saying it looked like he'd been throwing up black stuff. It was all over his mouth and in the sink. Black stuff. The cake had been chocolate. I felt sick. When did it happen? Last night sometime. His roommate heard him in the bathroom around midnight. Thought he had food poisoning." Sarah put her phone away, her hands shaking slightly. "HR sent an email. They're bringing in grief counselors this afternoon." I nodded, not knowing what to say. Alex had been healthy in his early 30s. Now he was dead less than 24 hours after eating that cake. The day went by in a blur of whispered talks and shocked faces. Most people thought Alex had died from some sudden illness. Maybe a heart problem they didn't know about, or an allergic reaction. No one mentioned the cake. At 5:15 p.m., Roger called me into his office again. This time he closed the blinds before speaking. "You heard about Hayes?" he said, gesturing for me to sit. "Yeah, Sarah told me." Roger nodded, his expression grim. "I want to be clear about something, Miller. That cake wasn't meant for Hayes." I stared at him, not getting it at first, then with growing horror as I understood what he meant. "It was meant for me. Yes, they're targeting you now." Roger leaned forward, his voice low. "Your ability to see the extras, your strict rule following, it's drawn attention. They..." "What are you talking about? Who's they?" Roger's look was steady. "Whatever controls this building. The entities that exist here." A chill ran through me as I recalled the thing that had searched the office after hours. The one I encountered when I stayed late. That's one manifestation. There are others. Roger looked tired, the lines in his face deeper than usual. "The rules keep them from noticing you, from marking you. The cake was poisoned." I said, my mind racing to process this new information. "Not in the way you're thinking." Roger tapped his fingers on his desk, a nervous habit I'd never seen from him before. "The food they leave it creates a connection, a way for them to find you later, to feed." Feed on what Roger's silence was answer enough. What exactly is happening here? I demanded, anger momentarily overpowering my fear. What is this place? Roger paused like he was deciding what he should share with me. Finally, he said, "Something inhuman lives in this building. Has for decades. The rules keep it from noticing you." I thought about all I'd witnessed in my short time at Axis Corp. Brian Reynolds' disappearance after coming in early, the entity that had hunted me after hours, the fake Michael that no one else could identify, and now Alex dead after eating unattended food. "The rules aren't arbitrary policy," I said slowly. "They're defense mechanisms. Against predators. Roger nodded once. Now you understand. Why does anyone work here? Why don't people leave? Some do when they can. Others. Roger shrugged. The pay is good, benefits are excellent, and where would they go? The job market is tight, especially for specialized roles. Most people don't notice anything strange anyway. Their minds can't process it. But you see it, I said. You know what's happening. 20 years in this building, Miller. I've seen things. He stopped, looking down at his hands. I've lost people. Good people who broke the rules or just got unlucky. I've learned how to survive here. I thought about my near-empty bank account. The student loans, the relief of that first paycheck, the desperation that had made me take this job in the first place. What do I do now? Keep following the rules, all of them. Be even more careful than before. Roger opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small silver device that looked like a key fob. Carry this. It won't stop them, but it might warn you when they're close. The extras hate the high-frequency tone it emits. I grabbed the device. It looked pretty normal. Just had one small button on the side. Press it if you see anything unusual. One press turns it on. Another turns it off. Roger stood signaling the end of our conversation. And Miller, don't tell anyone else what I've told you. Most couldn't handle it, and those who could might do something stupid. I pocketed the device and nodded. Thank you. As I walked back to my desk, I realized what all this meant. Axis Corp wasn't just an office with strange rules. It was a place where something not human was looking for its next target. And that target might be me. I sat at my computer pretending to work while thinking about everything Roger had told me. The rules weren't random. They were how you stayed alive in a place where dangerous things looked like normal people left gifts and took those who weren't careful. Alex had paid the price for his dismissal of those rules. I wasn't going to make the same mistake. I stood in the back row at Alex's funeral, watching his family accept condolences from a stream of Axis Corp employees. His mother held a tissue in her hand, her eyes red and swollen. His father stood next to her, shaking hands without emotion. They looked confused, trying to understand how their healthy 31-year-old son had died so suddenly. The official cause was listed as acute gastrointestinal hemorrhage. The medical examiner found no explanation for why Alex's digestive system had basically dissolved from the inside out. The cake, that normal-looking chocolate cake, had killed him in less than 24 hours. It should have been me. Roger's words kept playing in my head. That cake wasn't meant for Hayes. The entities in the building had marked me, and Alex had paid the price for my ability to see through their disguises. I slipped out before the service ended, unable to look at Alex's photo on the memorial stand any longer. I'd known him for barely a month, but I felt terrible about his death. 3 days later, I sat in my car in the Axis Corp parking garage at 6:58 a.m., watching the seconds tick by on my dashboard clock. 2 minutes until 7:00 a.m., the earliest we could safely enter the building according to rule number 1. I'd followed the rules religiously since my first day, but now I needed to understand why they worked. The small silver device Roger had given me sat on the passenger seat beside an EMF meter I'd ordered online. If something supernatural lived in this building, it might give off measurable electromagnetic frequencies. It was a shot in the dark, but I needed somewhere to start. At exactly 7:00 a.m., I grabbed my equipment, tucked it into my laptop bag, and headed into the building. Joseph Martinez nodded from behind the security desk as I badged in. "Morning, Mr. Miller." "Morning, Joseph." I looked at the security monitors behind him. One showed the parking garage, another the main entrance, and several others switched between different hallways and elevator banks. One screen was just static. "Camera issues?" I asked, pointing to the snow-filled screen. Joseph's eyes moved to it and back to me. "Maintenance problem. They're working on it." I nodded and headed to the elevators. Once inside, I looked at the panel of buttons. Floors 1 through 20 were clearly marked, but I'd never paid much attention to which departments were on which floors beyond our 14th floor data operations center. I pressed the button for the 5th floor. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder. The button didn't light up like the others. I made a face and selected the 14th floor, and the elevator started going up. When I reached my desk, I pulled up the company directory on my computer. Each department was listed with its floor number, but there was no entry for the 5th floor. I opened the building's evacuation map from the employee website. There it was, floor 5, clearly marked with exit routes, fire extinguisher locations, and emergency stairwells. A floor that officially existed but couldn't be reached. I began my workday as usual, handling data requests and updating databases. At lunch, I took the stairs down to the 6th floor, then tried to continue down to the 5th. The door to the stairwell between floors 6 and 5 was locked with a keypad. Weird for a fire exit. Back at my desk, I pulled up the security footage archives I could see as part of my data operations job. Most employees couldn't view these files, but Roger had given me database-level permissions to fix some corrupted entries last week. I still had that access. I searched backward through employee badge scans looking for clues. Brian Reynolds' disappearance, Marcus before him, 3 others I'd found from HR's automated resignation emails. I made a spreadsheet with the dates. The connection showed up right away, 27 days. Each disappearance had happened every 27 days, give or take 1 day. If this kept going, someone else would vanish in exactly 11 days. Miller. I quickly minimized my spreadsheet as Roger's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him standing at my cubicle entrance with a coffee cup, eyes narrowed. "Roger, what's up?" "Let's talk in my office." I followed him, trying to look casual. Had he somehow seen what I was researching? Did the building itself monitor our activities? Roger closed his office door and waved for me to sit. He took his time getting into his chair, looking at me with an expression I couldn't figure out. "You've been busy this morning," he finally said. "Just catching up on work? Accessing security archives isn't your job. Neither is trying to get to the 5th floor." I tried not to look surprised. "How did you—" "I've worked here for 20 years, Miller. You think I don't know when someone starts pulling threads?" He took a sip of his coffee. "Tell me what you found." I paused, not sure if this was a test. Roger had warned me to be careful, given me the device to detect extras. But how far did his help go? 27 days, I said. "That's the pattern. Every 27 days someone disappears." Roger's eyebrows rose slightly. "Go on." "And the 5th floor exists on paper, but not in reality. It's on every evacuation map, but you can't access it from the elevators or stairs." "What else?" I pulled the EMF meter from my pocket. I wanted to measure electromagnetic fluctuations near the places where people disappeared. See if there's any scientific explanation for what's happening. Roger set his coffee down and leaned back in his chair. For a long moment, he just looked at me as if making a decision. Then he sighed. "This building wasn't always like this," he said quietly. "When I started here, it was normal, boring even. Just another corporate office." "What happened?" 15 years ago, the executive team brought in a consultant, some new age type who promised to improve workplace energy and productivity." Roger's mouth twisted. "They performed a ritual in the executive conference room on the 5th floor, candles chanting the works. Most of the staff thought it was a joke, but it wasn't." "No." Roger rubbed his forehead. "They opened something they couldn't close. The first disappearance happened that night, the CEO's assistant. 1 minute she was working late, the next she was gone. Personal items still on her desk, car in the garage, never seen again." I thought about Brian Reynolds' car sitting abandoned in the garage. And then things started changing. The 5th floor became inaccessible overnight. Elevators would stop working at specific times. Food left in break rooms would vanish, then reappear looking identical but wrong. People started seeing copies of their coworkers. "The extras," I said. "Yes, and people kept disappearing, always when they broke some pattern we hadn't identified yet." Roger's eyes had a distant look. It took us years to figure out the rules. Each one was discovered through loss. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Why stay? Why does anyone stay once they realize what's happening? Roger's look sharpened. Where would we go? The thing that lives here now, it marks people. Those who learn too much, who see too much. It doesn't just let them walk away. So the rules protect us, but they're also a cage. Exactly. He nodded. The higher-ups know something is wrong, but most can't perceive it clearly. They've convinced themselves it's just bad luck or stress or typical corporate turnover. Their minds can't process what's really happening. But yours can. And mine. Yes, that's rare. Maybe 1 in 50 people can see the extras for what they are. Roger studied me. Your notice about the 27-day cycle, that's new information. I knew there was a pattern, but I couldn't pin it down exactly. I thought about the implications. So in 11 days, someone else will vanish. Roger nodded. Unless they're very, very careful. My EMF meter suddenly lit up its needle, swinging into the red zone. At the same moment, Roger's computer monitor flashed the screen, going black for a second before returning to normal. It's listening, Roger whispered, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. It always is. The EMF meter went back to normal readings. I put it in my pocket and tried to look calm, even though I felt really cold and scared. I need to think about all this, I said. Roger nodded. Be careful, Miller. The rules will protect you, but only if you follow them completely. No exceptions, no tests, no looking for answers. I went back to my desk, my mind racing. For the rest of the day, I went through the motions of my job while processing everything Roger had told me. A ritual that opened something. A 15-year haunting that had claimed countless victims. Rules that protected but also imprisoned. I faced a choice. I could leave Axis Corp knowing I might become a target outside the protective structure of the rules, or I could stay and try to survive in a building with something not human that hunted people. That afternoon, an email arrived from HR, Internal Opportunity Executive Assistant position, 5th floor operations. The listed salary was triple what I currently made. The requirements matched my qualifications exactly as if the position had been made just for me. Bait. That's what it was. The thing was offering me direct access to the 5th floor, the center of whatever had been let loose 15 years ago. It wanted me there for some reason. I closed the email without responding and pulled up my spreadsheet again. Over the past weeks, I'd been writing down every strange thing I'd seen or heard about. The thing that hunted after 600 p.m., the extras that showed up sometimes, the food that caused Alex's death. I started seeing patterns. The after-hours hunter never showed up on days when it rained. The extras couldn't copy unique physical features perfectly. The food left as bait was always sweet, never savory. At 7:25 p.m., I packed up my things, making sure to leave before the 8 p.m. deadline. Instead of heading to the parking garage, I went to Roger's office. He was still there, looking at reports with his desk lamp on the overhead lights already off. He looked up as I came in. Miller, what is it? I got the job offer for the 5th floor, I said, closing his door behind me. Triple my current salary. Roger's face tightened. Don't even think about it. I'm not. I sat down across from him. But I have a different proposal. I'm listening. I've documented patterns in the entity's behavior. I think there's a weakness we can exploit. I placed my notebook on his desk. Its activity fluctuates with weather conditions. It can't manifest certain forms on rainy days. The extras can't perfectly replicate unique physical features. Roger opened the notebook, looking at my detailed notes and diagrams. For the first time since I'd met him, he smiled. I've been waiting for someone to ask that, he said quietly. Someone who can see what I see, who thinks like I do. Ask what? His eyes met mine. A spark of hope in them I'd never seen before. If there's a way to fight back, to end this, Is there... I don't know, Roger admitted, but in 20 years I've collected my own observations. He unlocked his bottom desk drawer and pulled out a thick binder. Maybe together we can find the answer. As the office emptied around us, we stayed in Roger's office comparing notes under the light of his desk lamp. For the first time since starting at Axis Corp, I felt something beyond fear or confusion. I felt purpose. Whatever haunted this building had ruled unchallenged for 15 years. But perhaps that was about to change.